What if the greatest secret of Norse mythology is that fate was never truly blind, because something was already there, watching in the darkness long before the first world was born? The old northern myths speak of beginnings as if they were simple, as if the universe awakened like a spark in the night. But the deeper the stories are examined, the more the silence between their words begins to feel unsettling. For in those ancient verses lies the uneasy suggestion that the first moment of existence may not have been unwitnessed, and that something may have been present long before the gods ever claimed dominion over the cosmos. Before mountains rose, before seas found their shores, before even the sky knew its own name, there was only Ginnungagap, a vast and immeasurable abyss stretching between realms that had not yet fully formed. To one side burned Muspelheim, a kingdom of primordial fire whose heat shimmered through the emptiness. To the other lay Niflheim, a silent domain of frost, where cold drifted like breath in eternal night. And between these two extremes rested the great void, waiting for something no one yet understood. The ancient poets described this meeting of fire and ice as the beginning of the world. They spoke of warmth touching frozen mist, of vapor thickening into the first shape of life. Yet even within their songs there lingers an unspoken question that echoes through time. Why did these forces meet at that precise moment after an eternity of silence? And what stirred the stillness of the abyss so that creation could finally begin? From that mysterious convergence, something immense slowly emerged from the drifting rime. The first great being, ancient and immeasurable, known in the old stories as Ymir. He was not born in the way living things are born, nor shaped by the hand of any god. Instead, he rose from the tension between fire and frost, as if existence itself had taken form. But the deeper mystery was never how Ymir appeared. It was why the void allowed it. For the earliest myths often present creation as an accident of cosmic forces. Yet the longer one studies the old traditions, the more that explanation begins to feel incomplete, because the Norse believed deeply in word, the invisible pattern through which all things unfold. It was said to guide events beyond the sight of gods and mortals alike, a force not easily defined, yet present in every turning of destiny. Most later storytellers described Ward simply as fate, an inevitable current flowing through time. But in the oldest whispers of the North, its meaning was far stranger. Some believed word was not merely a law of existence, but something far more aware, not a thread alone, but perhaps the quiet observer of the threads themselves, an intelligence so ancient that even the gods may never have fully understood it. If such a presence existed, then the birth of the cosmos might not have been entirely blind. The meeting of fire and ice may have unfolded exactly as it always would. Yet the silence surrounding that moment begins to feel less like emptiness and more like anticipation, as if the abyss of Ginnungagap had been waiting patiently for the first movement of the world, and perhaps something within that abyss had been watching as it happened. As ages passed, the universe slowly expanded into realms and pathways. From the earliest powers arose the foundations of existence itself, and at the center of it all stood Core Yggdrasil, the immense ash tree whose roots and branches bound the worlds together. Its limbs stretched across the heavens, touching realms both radiant and shadowed. Yet even the gods would one day admit that the tree felt older than their own dominion. Its roots reached deep into mysterious wells, where time seemed to move differently. Waters of memory and becoming gathered in those hidden places beneath the worlds. There the Norns tended the patterns of existence, shaping the unfolding of events. They carved the runes of destiny into the fabric of reality itself. Yet even they never claimed to have created word. Among all the gods who walked beneath Yggdrasil's branches, none questioned these mysteries more than Odin. He was not satisfied with power, nor with the golden halls of divine rule. What drove him was a deeper hunger, a restless need to understand the hidden structure of existence. He studied the runes, listened to the Norns, and watched the slow movements of fate. And gradually, an unsettling thought began to take root in his mind. For Odin noticed something that others seemed willing to ignore. The patterns of destiny did not always feel newly written, or sometimes they carried the quiet weight of something remembered, as if the world itself were following paths carved long before the current age began, paths that even the Allfather might not have the power to change. And if that were true, then the gods themselves might not stand at the beginning of the story. They might simply be the latest figures walking through an older design, a design that had already begun in the darkness of Ginnungagap, long before the first world rose, long before Ymir opened his ancient eyes, and long before Odin began to suspect that something beyond fate might be watching still. Ages before Odin sat upon the high seat of Asgard, the cosmos had already begun whispering its quiet riddles. The realms stood firm beneath the vast canopy of Yggdrasil, each world turning in its appointed rhythm. To most of the gods, this order felt natural, inevitable, unquestioned. But Odin had never trusted appearances, especially when they seemed too perfect to be accidental. For somewhere beneath the harmony of the worlds, he sensed a deeper pattern, moving in silence. He had seen how destiny unfolded with a precision that unsettled even the wisest among the Aesir. Wars, alliances, storms and quiet moments of peace all seemed to follow invisible currents. Even the Norns, ancient weavers beside the roots of Yggdrasil, spoke of Weird with a careful reverence. They shaped the threads of becoming, yet never claimed to be their origin. And that silence troubled Odin more than any prophecy ever could. Many believed word was simply the law of fate, a force as natural as wind or tide. But Odin wondered whether the word concealed something far older than the gods themselves. Because fate, in its purest form, should be blind and impartial. Yet the unfolding of the cosmos often felt deliberate, almost attentive, as if the story of the worlds was being observed as it unfolded. That suspicion was what drove Odin deeper into his endless search for knowledge. He traveled across the realms, seeking wisdom wherever it hid, from giants older than mountains, from spirits dwelling beneath forgotten rivers. Every fragment of knowledge he gathered revealed more complexity than he expected, and each answer seemed to point toward an even greater mystery behind it. Eventually, his search led him again to the roots of Yggdrasil. There, beneath the vast tree that bound the 9 realms together, the air carried an ancient stillness. The Norns moved quietly beside their sacred wells, tending the waters of memory and becoming. They carved runes into the unseen fabric of existence, guiding the paths of countless lives. Yet when Odin questioned them about the true origin of word, they answered only with silence. That silence lingered with him long after he left the roots of the world tree. For Odin understood something few others dared to consider. if even the Norns served the flow of destiny, then something must exist beyond them. Something older than prophecy. Older perhaps even than the first shaping of the world. A presence that did not weave the threads, but watched the tapestry unfold. It was then that Odin began to look not only forward into prophecy, but backward into the forgotten past. The oldest myths spoke of Ymir rising from the meeting of fire and ice. But the deeper Odin studied those tales, the more questions began to surface. Why had the void of Ginnungagap stirred at that precise moment in eternity? And why did the earliest events of creation feel strangely inevitable? When Odin gazed upon Yggdrasil, the questions only grew heavier. The great ash tree stretched beyond sight, its branches cradling the realms like distant stars. But its roots plunged into depths that even the Allfather could not fully comprehend. Some roots touched wells of wisdom. Others reached into shadows that no god had named. And Odin began to suspect that the tree connected more than the worlds he knew. For what if Yggdrasil did not simply bind realms together across space? What if its vast roots also touched ages long vanished from memory? Worlds that had risen before this one, only to fade into silence beyond time. Worlds whose stories had been erased, leaving behind only faint echoes within the roots. If that were true, then the cosmos itself might be far older than the gods believed. The thought unsettled Odin in ways he could not easily dismiss, because if other worlds had existed before, then their endings must have come as well. Cycles of rising and fading, repeating across the vastness of existence. Creation not as a single beginning, but as a pattern turning endlessly through time. A pattern that no god had ever truly controlled. Slowly, another name began to surface within Odin's thoughts. Ragnarok, the twilight spoken of in prophecy, when the age of the gods would pass beyond the horizon of time. Most believed it was a distant catastrophe, waiting somewhere in the future. But Odin began to fear that it might be something far older than prophecy itself. And if Ragnarok had happened before, if worlds had already risen, flourished, and faded beneath Yggdrasil's branches, then the destiny awaiting the gods was not a sudden ending. It was simply the next turning of a cycle that had been unfolding since Ginnungagap first opened. A cycle that something in the darkness may have been watching from the very beginning. The more Odin searched for answers, the more the universe began to resemble a puzzle whose pieces had been scattered across eternity. Every realm held fragments of truth, but none revealed the full design. The giants spoke of beginnings older than memory, the seers of endings already written in shadow. And everywhere, the same quiet suggestion thus appeared beneath the surface of every legend, that the story of the cosmos might have begun long before the gods first opened their eyes. Odin understood that knowledge demanded sacrifice. Wisdom in the oldest traditions was never given freely to those who merely desired it. It had to be pursued through hardship, patience, and the willingness to face unsettling truths. So the Allfather began to follow paths few gods would dare to walk. Paths that led beyond the shining halls of Asgard and into the deeper mysteries of existence. His search eventually brought him to one of the most ancient places in all the worlds. At the base of Yggdrasil lay a well, whose waters were said to contain the memory of the cosmos itself. The well of Mimir, keeper of knowledge, older than the kingdoms of the gods. Its surface reflected not only the present, but echoes of events that had shaped reality long ago. And Odin suspected that somewhere within those waters lay the truth he had been seeking. Mimir watched the Allfather carefully when he arrived. The ancient guardian had witnessed ages pass beneath the branches of Yggdrasil. He knew that curiosity could illuminate the mind, but it could also disturb forces best left sleeping. Yet Odin's determination was unmistakable, burning brighter than caution. And so the keeper of the well allowed him to gaze into the depths of memory. What Odin saw there did not resemble the simple stories told in the halls of Asgard. The waters revealed vast movements of time, cycles unfolding far beyond a single age, worlds emerging from oceans of mist, rising into brief brilliance beneath the sky. And then, slowly, those worlds fading again into silence, not destroyed in sudden chaos, but passing beyond the horizon of time as new beginnings approached. The visions unsettled him, because within them, Odin saw patterns repeating across ages that seemed impossibly distant. Realms forming beneath the branches of Yggdrasil again and again, civilizations rising, gods ruling, destinies unfolding along familiar paths, until eventually, each age reached a moment of twilight. That twilight was known by a name that echoed through prophecy: Ragnarok. Not merely a catastrophe awaiting the gods of Asgard, but something that felt strangely familiar within the visions. A moment when the old order faded, making way for a world that would rise anew. And the deeper Odin looked, the more inevitable that moment appeared. What troubled him most was not the ending itself. It was the feeling that the cycle had already happened before, as if the universe had walked this path countless times across forgotten ages. Creation unfolding, destiny tightening its threads, and the twilight returning once more. A rhythm repeating quietly through the vastness of existence. Within those visions, Odin noticed something else, something far more unsettling. Through every age, through every rising and fading world, a strange stillness remained. A presence never directly seen, yet always implied in the unfolding of events. Not shaping the story openly, not intervening like the gods sometimes did, but always there, as though observing the endless turning of the cosmic wheel. Odin could not name what he sensed. The old word would return to his thoughts again and again. Yet it no longer felt like a simple force guiding fate. It felt more like a silent witness to the cycles of existence, something older than prophecy itself. When Odin finally lifted his gaze from the well, the branches of Yggdrasil seemed different to him. The great tree was no longer merely the pillar of the 9 realms. It felt more like the spine of a far older structure, stretching across ages rather than worlds, its roots disappearing into forgotten beginnings, its branches reaching toward futures that had already happened before. And as Odin returned to Asgard, a realization slowly began to take hold in his mind. If the visions of the well were true, then even the gods stood inside a pattern they did not control. A cycle that had begun in the darkness of Ginnungagap long before their age. A cycle that would continue long after their twilight had passed. And somewhere within that vast turning of worlds, something might still be watching. The knowledge Odin carried back from the well of Mimir did not bring him peace. If anything, it deepened the quiet unease that had followed him for many years. For the visions he had witnessed suggested something far more troubling than a distant prophecy. They hinted that the destiny awaiting the gods had already unfolded many times before, and that the twilight spoken of in the old songs was not an ending, but a returning. From that moment forward, Odin's search for understanding became more urgent than ever. The golden halls of Asgard still shone with power and celebration. The gods feasted, warriors trained, and the worlds continued their steady rhythm. Yet Odin often sat in silence upon Lidskjalf, the high seat from which all realms could be seen, watching the unfolding of events as though searching for a pattern hidden beneath them. The more he observed, the more the world seemed to move along invisible pathways. Certain events arrived with an unsettling sense of inevitability. Storms formed where none had been expected. Encounters occurred that felt strangely prepared long before they happened. And every thread of destiny seemed to drift quietly toward the same distant horizon. Ragnarok. The twilight of the gods had long been spoken of in prophecy. Most believed it would come as a final storm that would end the age of the Aesir. But Odin had begun to see it differently. Not as chaos, but as the closing movement of a pattern repeating across time. Because if the visions from Mimir's well were true, the cosmos itself moved in cycles. Worlds emerged, flourished beneath Yggdrasil's branches, and then slowly gave way to silence. The oceans would rise. The old order would fade beyond the horizon of time. And from those waters, a new world would one day rise again. Fresh skies, fresh lands, and new beings to walk beneath the great tree. The more Odin reflected on this possibility, the more troubling questions began to follow. If the cycle had happened before, what role did the gods truly play within it? Were they the rulers of creation, as the songs proudly declared? Or were they simply figures placed upon a stage that had existed long before their arrival? Participants in a story already set in motion. The thought weighed heavily upon him. Odin had sacrificed much in his pursuit of wisdom. He had sought the runes, endured trials, and given pieces of himself for knowledge, all in the hope that understanding might allow him to shape the future of the world. Yet now he feared that the future might never have been his to shape. Sometimes he would stand beside Yggdrasil and gaze upward through its endless branches. The great tree shimmered softly beneath the light of distant realms. Every world was connected through its living structure. Yet Odin could not shake the feeling that the tree itself remembered things the gods had forgotten. Ages of existence far older than the current sky. Its roots reached into places even the Allfather had never fully explored, into wells where time moved like slow water beneath the earth, into depths where the earliest moments of creation still echoed faintly, and perhaps even into remnants of worlds that had risen and vanished long before the present age. Worlds whose stories had faded beyond memory. If those worlds had truly existed, then each must have faced its own twilight. Each must have reached the moment when the old order passed away. And each time, the waters would have withdrawn once more, allowing the land to rise again beneath a new dawn, a new beginning that felt strangely familiar. The ancient word wood returned often to Odin's thoughts. The Norns spoke of it with careful respect beside their sacred wells. But Odin could no longer see it as merely the force of fate. It felt more like the quiet rhythm behind the entire turning of existence, the unseen presence behind every cycle of creation and renewal. And sometimes, in the deepest hours of reflection, a single unsettling question would surface. If the worlds had risen and fallen countless times beneath Yggdrasil, if Ragnarok was only the next turning of a cosmic wheel, then who or what had been watching these cycles since the darkness of Ginnungagap? And why had the pattern never once broken? By the time these revelations settled fully into Odin's mind, the weight of destiny had already begun pressing upon the world. The patterns he had seen within Mimir's well refused to leave him in peace. If Ragnarok was only the turning of an endless cycle, then the fate of the gods had already been written long ago. For the first time since the birth of Asgard, the Allfather felt something unfamiliar stirring within him. Not curiosity, but fear. At first, that fear drove him to search for deeper understanding. But slowly, something far more dangerous began to take root beneath his thoughts. Knowledge alone would not be enough to escape the cycle he had seen. If a pattern ruled the cosmos, then he would rule the pattern. If fate was a string moved by a hidden force, he would break that string and control that force. What began as the search of a seeker slowly transformed into the ambition of a ruler. Odin studied the runes not merely to read destiny, but to command it. He listened to the Norns beside the roots of Yggdrasil with a new and unsettling intention. Even the deepest mysteries of the world tree became tools in his growing obsession, because the Allfather could not accept a universe governed by anything beyond his reach. The fear of Ragnarok only sharpened that resolve. Every prophecy that spoke of the twilight of the gods became a challenge to his authority. Every whisper of word sounded less like fate and more like defiance. And Odin began to believe that the pattern itself could be broken. If only he could grasp the hidden force that moved the threads. But the more he attempted to bend the pattern of existence, the more the pattern resisted him. Events unfolded with a precision that even the Allfather could not disturb. Storms appeared exactly where the oldest prophecies had foretold. Encounters between gods, giants, and kings followed paths written long before they occurred. The threads of word tightened quietly across the realms, and with every attempt to control them, those threads only grew stronger. What Odin believed was resistance began to reveal itself as inevitability. The closer the worlds moved toward their twilight, the more unbreakable those threads became. Even the preparations of Valhalla seemed to unfold exactly as the ancient verses had promised. As if Odin's struggle itself had always been part of the design. Still, the Allfather refused to yield. He searched deeper within the hidden knowledge of the cosmos. Ancient runes were carved into stone and spirit in his attempt to command the future. He sought power in places even the oldest beings approached with caution, because Odin believed that no force in existence should stand above him. Yet beneath every discovery lay the same quiet resistance. The threads of Weird did not snap beneath his will. They did not loosen. Instead, they tightened further around the unfolding of events, like cords slowly drawing the universe toward its destined horizon. In time, a terrible suspicion began to grow in Odin's mind. What if Word was not simply a force that governed fate? What if it was something older than the gods who believed they ruled the cosmos? Something that had watched the rise of every world beneath Yggdrasil. Something that could not be challenged without consequence. But by then, Odin had already crossed the boundary between wisdom and defiance. His fear of the cycle had become arrogance. His search for truth had become a demand for control. The Allfather no longer sought to understand Word. He intended to surpass it. And so the final movement of the age approached. The threads of wood pulled the world steadily toward their twilight. The closer Ragnarok came, the more impossible it became to resist, until the moment arrived when even Odin understood the truth he had tried to deny. Some forces in the cosmos cannot be ruled, not even by the Allfather. In the end, Odin could not prevent the coming of Ragnarok. The twilight of the gods arrived exactly as the ancient prophecies had foretold. The old order passed slowly beyond the horizon of time, and the halls of the Aesir faded into silence. The oceans rose across the lands of the 9 realms beneath the shadow of Yggdrasil, and the age of the gods entered its final twilight. For a moment the world rested beneath an endless sea. Mountains disappeared beneath the waters. Forests faded into memory. The sky reflected only the quiet stillness between ages. It was the same silence Odin had once glimpsed within the depths of Mimir's well. The pause that always came between one world and the next. And as he watched the world dissolve into that silence, Odin felt a strange recognition. Something about this ending felt familiar, in a way prophecy could not explain. The waters, the fading sky, the quiet breath of the cosmos between cycles. It was as if he had stood here before, watching the same twilight unfold, as if this moment had already happened. Then the realization came slowly, like a memory returning from a forgotten dream. This was not the first time Odin had witnessed the end of the world. He had already searched for forbidden knowledge before. He had already tried to command the pattern of destiny, and he had already faced the same inevitable twilight, because the cycle did not end with Ragnarok. The oceans began to withdraw, just as the ancient verses had promised. Green land rose again beneath the branches of Yggdrasil. A new sky opened above a renewed world, and existence quietly began again. It was then that Odin understood the true shape of his fate. When the new world began, so would he. Somewhere within the rising age, he would be born again. He would grow into the same restless seeker of knowledge, and the same questions would awaken within him. The runes would call to him once more. The mysteries of the cosmos would pull him deeper into their silence. And slowly the same dangerous thought would return to his mind. If a pattern ruled the cosmos, then perhaps it could be ruled. If fate was a thread, perhaps it could be broken. And if word controls everything, then he would control word step by step. Choice by choice, he would walk the same path again. Curiosity would lead him toward hidden knowledge. Pride would convince him that no force in the universe should stand above the Allfather. And together, they would guide him back toward the same defiance, until the twilight returned once more. Only then did Odin understand the deeper cruelty of the cycle. The repetition of worlds was not the true prison. The prison was the seed placed within him, a hunger to know what should remain hidden, and the arrogance to believe he could command what cannot be ruled. No voice ever confirmed where that seed had come from. But Odin remembered the silent presence behind word, the watcher that had existed before the first world was born, the presence that had observed every turning of existence, and perhaps every mistake of the gods. So the new age rose beneath a young sky. Life returned to the earth beneath Yggdrasil's ancient branches. New civilizations would grow and believe themselves to be the first, unaware that countless worlds had already risen before them, unaware that the cycle had never truly ended. And perhaps the most unsettling question of all is this: if Odin is destined to repeat the same defiance because a seed of curiosity and pride was placed within him, then what if the same ancient watcher has placed similar seeds within us? Enter the night, discover the world,